Okay, welcome to the first chapter of Summer Book Club with the Unselected Journals of Emma and Leon. I'm so excited to have you guys. I'm so excited to be able to spend the morning chatting about all things Emma with you and to be able to hear you guys' insights as well. I think that is the fun of book club, is being able to hear everybody's different takes as well as different pronunciation. I know some of my girlfriends and I have laughed about different book series where in the past we pronounce things very, very differently. And so it's interesting to hear how people, say different names and stuff. I don't actually know. I've never heard the author say if it's Lion or Leon. In my brain, I think it is Leon just because of the era and like being around more of like French pronunciation. To me, it just makes more sense that it is Emma M. Leon, but it could be Emma M. Lion. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what Beth says if she ever reveals how it is actually pronounced. But um, so, welcome to Book Club 1 of the Unselected Journals, Volume 1. In today's meeting, we will cover entries March 5th through March 31st. So, this is the first segment of reading for the Unselected Journals. And just a reminder for those of you joining in as this is the first call, is that Emma's books or the Unselected Journals of Emma are not set up in chapters, they're set up in journal entries. So instead of reading chapters, 1 through 10 for the first segment, it's the entries of her journal, which is why it's March 5th through March 31st. So if you guys are joining in late and haven't got the reading schedule, just shoot me a DM or an email after this call and I will send you the PDF file that has the different segments for each call. But for today, we're going to jump right in and get chatting about Emma. So, the theme of this call is going to be around location, getting to know Emma, and kind of the way that Beth is setting the plot to talk about and explore Emma's story and her growth as a person, as well as the layers of symbolism that she uses through location as a character in the series. This is a theme and motif that we see a lot throughout the entire series, so it's really fun to be able to pick up on it right off the bat, is that the locations are important characters in the book. So we start off, the very first description, the very first kind of feeling we get of Emma is the summary on the back of the book, which is, I've arrived in London without incident. There are few triumphs in my recent life, but I count this as one. My existence of the last 3 years has been nothing but incident. That's the very first, I mean, it's on the back of the cover. It's the very first line in her journal. And so I'm curious, just from that, was there anything that you guys kind of like started to feel about Emma or started to think about as that is like the introduction to Emma and the series?
So I I have I've rereading these the pages because I actually started reading this back when you did your first our little introductory
Oh,
video,
yeah.
and then I decided I'd read them, and by before I knew it I'd purchased all of them and I finished book 8. So I had to go through it and I had to read all of them again.
It was,
Um but what I think is really interesting and I is just how you mentioned kind of how each location is actually like its own character. Like there's so much description just going into like just the house itself and things like that. But what I also didn't realize is how many questions these first 30 days, just the first page, like just just puts in my brain. Like, 'cause it's a journal. And then she says, my existence the last 3 years has been nothing but incident. So I'm like, okay, so where's the last 3 years?
yeah.
And I think, is it like page one? I don't wanna like get too ahead, but like on the first page, she talks about a monkey's head that used to be inside her hat box, you
Yes.
know? And I'm sitting there like,
What even?
yeah, well, and then you're like, okay, someone whose name is Maxwell sends her a monkey's head, and
Mhm.
she used to carry it around in a box. Like, who is this woman, and what is that an incident of the last 3 years, you know?
Mhm.
But
I love that insight, and honestly, like you said, this series, the writing is masterful because it is so satisfying and so unsatisfying at the same time. Because Beth is a master storyteller in that she gives you so much detail and leaves you hanging all at the same time. And so, yeah, just read. I mean, you're right. It is page one, right off the bat, right? You have the very first sentence: I've arrived in London without incident. By the end of the first page, we're reading about the Great Burning of 1882, the lack of privacy, her journal. Like, obviously, she's a big journaler because she's talking about not censoring herself, and that this journal does not deserve to have a foul black mark running through it. Like, okay, so this is one journal. How many other journals are there? And then, like you said, by the end, we have her talking about the yeah, how the guy in the train was helping her with her suitcase, and that it, yeah, for over a year it carried something, a modicum less pleasant, the monkey's head Maxwell sent me. Like, again, what even, right? Who is this woman? And so I think from page one it is just so like, you really there's really no censorship about what you're getting with Emma, right? Which is actually a question that I want to explore a little bit later into the call. Um, really calling to the sentence that she said. I mean, I read it already, but this journal does not deserve to have a foul black mark running through every incriminating thought. So then, how many incriminating thoughts is this woman having? How many incriminating incidents is this woman having? And then, I will no longer censor myself, right? And so we see from page one that Emma really is gonna give us the raw and real. She's gonna give us the monkey's head. She's gonna give us the great burning. She's gonna give us all of her uncensored thoughts, her incriminating, reflections, her judgments. And that's just on page one. Like, I have, I mean, I read this book the first time and just read it for pleasure because it's truly just the delight of my life to read this book. Going back through it and annotating, I'm like, oh my word, you could write an entire thesis about the mastery that is this series. Like, I truly, maybe it's just because I'm obsessed with it, but I truly see this series becoming something legendary like Jane Austen's books.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it is so artfully done, and the fact that she's gonna write potentially 20, I think 24 of them, like, I'm just, oh, I'm dying. Okay, so yes, thank you, Charity, for that insight. Wonderful. Graham, do you have any thoughts on the introduction of St. Crispin's lapis lazuli house as a character, or the first kind of meetings of Emma? And I don't know if you've ever talked on Zoom, but if you tap the little audio button in the bottom corner, it will unmute you and you can talk without the video being on. Okay. We'll keep going. If you have something to say, just blurt it out. We're here to chat.
I
Okay.
wanna
Yeah, go.
I just I on the second page, you know how so she just says how this journal doesn't deserve like a black mark running through it and everything.
Mhm.
And I underlined that and I like circled and I just loved it because I just feel like women, we just censor ourselves all the time. But then what I just thought was so funny is how contradicting she is because just on the next page there's a foul black mark running through the book, right?
Yeah.
And so I circled that and I put a question mark because I was like, hold on a second, like I thought this was the woman I was getting.
Mhm.
But we see that even though what she really wants is to be uncensored and what she really wants to be able to say everything, she still has those tendencies, which I also thought was just really human. And I just really liked adding the depth to that character. So
I
there's not many foul black marks, but we will be seeing some quote unquote censoring,
Mhm.
which I just thought was really interesting.
I'm so glad that you pointed that out because I think that is also a really powerful, like, literary device. And not even just in the description, but the actual usage of a slash through in the text print itself, right? We don't see that very often in printed word, right? In the printed books. It's sometimes it will be, in parentheses or in italic, but we rarely see the actual use of a slash through in the printed text. And so I think that, like you said, that is just such an interesting, a contradiction of her own thoughts, but also a really powerful device in showing just how human she actually is and how relatable she is, in that how many times have we ourselves said, I'm going to quit censoring myself, and turn around and censor ourselves the very next breath. So it is really cool to see again how human Emma is and how relatable she is to us, but then how much she also teaches us in in the journey. And I also don't want to spoil, and I'm going to try really really hard not to spoil, but like Charity said, you will see here and there throughout the text other cross outs of text, but then also notice the frequency of that as the books and the journals progress. um okay, I love that. Thank you, Charity. The next question, I mean, we're kind of chatting about this already, but what were your first impressions of St. Crispin's? What were your first impressions of Lapis Lazuli House? And then kind of going off of that, like how do the places that we live in or that we frequent really shape us as people?
I actually have a lot of impressions just looking at this little diagram that you have because frankly, as you read through it, it is actually very difficult to, at least it was for me. Like I'm directionally challenged. My lefts and rights are like that is what I've got. I can do up and down, left and right most of the time. Um, but I guess like in general, when she does go through and she explains kind of how everything's at, there's um like the diagonal and this road and this road and this road. You're like, she only really describes, I think, 5 streets, but I just already it's all kind of lost on me.
Yeah.
And so it is cool seeing this little diagram that you found. That isn't in any of the books. Did you just
It's
find
not.
that online?
It's actually Beth, the author, posted it on her Instagram.
Oh, I love it. Okay. That's very helpful. And it's so cute. So I'm seeing like, hey, that's where Lapis was like all that. Okay, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
this is something like I think what I'm gonna do is actually print out a mini copy of this and just tuck it in the cover of my book because it does,
mhm.
especially like later on in the series, which you'll know this, Charity, because you've already read the whole thing so far. But she frequents so many places and she's
Oh yeah.
constantly on the move, and so it can get a little consuming of like, oh, she's on Barron Square, or she's at Barron Square, and then she's back at Lapis Lazuli, and then she's like at the what's it called, the tea house, and right? Like, where is she going? And then I also think it's really nice to have the reference for like direction and how far she really does.
Mm, exactly. Yeah. And like on her morning walks, I'm like, okay, like how actually far is she walking every morning, Like and there's so many things which I think, as a girl and a woman in my 20s, right? Like trying to even just her little things like, oh, I'm gonna wake up early and I'm gonna go on a walk in the morning and then I'm gonna, go to sleep and I'm gonna take another little walk, and it's just like she's trying so hard not to be lazy, not to be indulgent, not to be like all these things. It's just really cool the little things that you can see her actively developing her character on purpose. And like she so strongly will not become, an uneducated woman, regardless of everyone standing in her way too, which I just think is so funny, which
I
I love. I'm like, why? Like, become an educated woman. Good for you?
I 100%. This is something. So I mean, I call her my aunt. She's actually my husband's aunt, but my aunt Kara was the one who recommended this series to me, and that was something that Kara and I were talking about. Is like how inspired I was to live my life after reading this series, which I think is the mark of quality literature. Is if you are physically moved to betterment or moved to change after reading something, then that means it's good stuff. And I really kept having that feeling over and over and over again as I read Emma, is like, man, she just finds delight and possibility in everything. Like even the crazy things that happen to her, which I mean, we already get a taste of it with the monkey's head and the great burning, like this allusion to these massive incidents that have happened to Emma. And so, like, yet somehow she still finds the way to be optimistic and to be creative and to look for the whimsy and the magic. And that is kind of another underlying theme of like Emma takes her life by the reins and just goes like that. She just has that passion and that zest. And like you said, she like wants to be an educated woman. She actively is trying to better herself. And I think that in a world where everything's kind of just easy for us, especially in a first world country, in a very privileged country where we do have the world pretty much at our feet, it's really important that we as modern day women are actively pursuing betterment, right? That we are pushing ourselves to live up to our greatest potential and pushing ourselves to, not to burn out and not to feel like we're never enough, but to feel like I am living up to the measure of my creation. And that is what's so fulfilling about life itself. And I think that is something that's really fulfilling about reading Emma's stories. You really see that she's pushing herself to live up to who she truly knows she can be. Okay. Kind of last question on this theme, or not, we might have more, who knows. Is what were your first thoughts on Lapis Lazuli, her house, and the role that it plays or that it might play in Emma's story, kind of thinking of it as a character?
So the first thing, I guess, and I'm not super educated on like Old English infrastructure, like how they create their houses, or even just the little words she was even using. Like I had to look up the garret when she was, she goes up into, that's her new rooms, is the garret, and I was like, what in the world is a garret? So I had to go to my faithful Google and actually look up like what is the garret, and then I was like trying to imagine Lapis Lazuli house, and I was like, okay, um what is a portico? But it's like there's a squared portico that needs to be repainted, and then like five curved steps leading to the front door. Um, just different things like that. And so I guess what I think is interesting is that like she kind of goes in and she talks about like tall, memorable gray limestone exterior carvings, like just kind of a beautiful house. But then she says that as impressive as it is, so apparently this is a very impressive house,
Yeah.
right? But then she also says it doesn't take itself overly seriously. And I think what's really interesting is Emma, looking outside in, people think some crazy things about Emma, right? But she absolutely 100% does not take herself seriously, like too seriously, Or she'll be like, "Oh, it's my regular Sunday," and then just all these crazy things happen, and people will be like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And she's just like, she just takes it all in stride. So I almost feel like the house is is kind of a personification of kind of where her roots, where she came from, just kind of her whole line that just did what they wanted, or it's just interesting. So I like that the house is so similar to Emma, but of course the house precedes Emma. So maybe it was the house and the people that created that kind of helped create Emma into who she is too. So that was an interesting question. Like, does the place shape up us? Do we shape a place? Like the place existed before Emma, right? So,
But the place wouldn't exist without the continuation of Emma.
oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is a beautiful, beautiful paradox that we really get to see. And I love that you said that Lapis Lazuli is the personification of Emma because it really, really is. Like there is something so just I love that house. Like reading this story, I've always been one that's like, I want a house that's like pretty, but like crisp and nice. And then after reading about this house, I'm like, no, I want a house with all the whimsy. I want the weird doors and the quirky windows and right, like I want a house that feels alive because to me, when I read about this house, it feels alive. It feels so full of endless possibility and it feels homey. And I think that it's really interesting to really start to look at these themes as you read through more of the series. And there's like something I want to say so bad, but I can't because it
Yeah, I
comes
know.
later.
Careful,
So
careful,
maybe
okay?
you and I can text about it when we're off the call and don't spoil it for other people. But getting to see this interesting interplay between the house and the culture of the house shaping Emma, the people who shaped Emma, and then the way that Emma returns to this house and how she begins to build out her life there and how that she influences it and begins to shape it. So I think it's really powerful to start that introspection for ourselves of like, are we shaping the places that we're in and how are they shaping us? And not to make this super coachy, but this is often something that I think about as a life coach is what are the circumstances, right? Because it is absolutely true that our circumstances impact us. the people that we are the result of the five people that we spend the most time around. And that says a lot about what we're going to accomplish, about who we are, the values we have. And at the same time, something that I constantly teach my clients is you are not the result of your circumstances. You are the result of your thoughts and your actions and your beliefs, right? And so again, we have this really interesting paradox and kind of parallelism here of yes, this is true. Like, yes, the house shaped Emma and St. Crispin's shaped Emma, and the opposite is true where Emma shapes these places as well. And the zest and the fire and the whimsy that she brings into St. Crispin's, I mean, it trails behind her like a summer storm. Like she just brings life to the places that she goes. So I think it'll be interesting as we continue this series to see how this plays out and develops kind of deeper and deeper into the narrative. Um, Graham, Charity, any other thoughts on St. Crispin's and the house before we move on? Okay. Graham, also, if you don't want to talk, trying to make this anybody who joins later, if you don't want to talk, you can also put stuff in the chat and I will read it out loud. So if you just want to like type something in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Okay, moving on. Emma, our girl Emma. So we've already talked about her in kind of the very first page introduction, her monkey head in a case, the great burning, her journals, the whimsy and power that she brings into the world. And very first thing that Charity and I actually said was this interesting idea on page 1 of how her censoring herself in her own personal journal. This is something as a big journaler myself that I have really, really had to work on cutting out of my own journaling habits, is trying to censor what I'm writing and trying to hold back or change my honest thoughts or opinions to make it more palatable or to make it more appropriate or whatever. And I think sometimes that kind of comes from the culture that I grew up in, because in the culture that I grew up in, it was always really encouraged to journal. And like, I remember as a kid and as a teen going through reading like a lot of my ancestors' journals and a lot of like, I come from a long family of like pioneer ancestry. And so reading about their trek across the plains and the Oregon Trail and all that, and realizing like I'm really grateful that I know so much about my past because my ancestors have kept journals and kept really, really documented, histories of their lives. And then I think sometimes I get so up in my head about that of like, wait, but my posterity is going to read this. Like, what are they going to think of me? Or I can't put that in my journal. And I've really had to let go of that and decide that, you know what, like there are journals that will never see the light of day from my posterity. Like those are my burn journals. Like those are journals where I can be 100% unhinged and completely uncensored and just get it out because my sanity depends on it. And at the same time, sometimes there are things that I add in journals that I know I'm going to keep and probably my posterity will read because I just want them to know what life was really like. And I don't feel the need to like censor it and make it all roses and perfect or even like water down how hard things were at times. So this was actually the very first annotation that I made in I lie. It's the second annotation I made in my copy is I highlighted I will no longer I will no longer censor myself, excuse me. And I really ask in the sticky note that I added is how, where, and why am I censoring myself? And what about my life would change if I no longer censored myself? So this is a question I want to pose to you guys is how, where, and why are you censoring yourself? And what about your life would change if you no longer censored yourself?
Is that like a deep thought kind of rhetorical question?
It
Because that
can
would be
be.
hard to answer just sitting here right now. I'm like, dang, that's a really hard question.
Yeah, it can
Um,
totally be rhetorical. If you have just a thought or impression that you'd want to share, then that's open. But yeah, you don't have to. This is a deep question, so you don't have to feel like you have to share the answer to that publicly.
I do want I really like how you worded that because what's interesting is I kind of think just throughout the readings, I was already asking myself this question. It wasn't in those words. It wasn't such a formed actual thought. But I would think like would I write that in my journal? Or sometimes I'd be like, just out and say it, Emma, like just come on, just tell us what happened. But then you know, the title is the unselected journals of, you know, this isn't her, she doesn't have, like you said, like a burn journal and the other things. And we don't know what the Great Burning of 1882 was, right? Was it 82?
Yeah.
Um, but it was that thing that event that caused her to not want to censor herself. And so I almost feel like we all kind of have like a great burning of 1882, or just an event where we realize that we are censored, or that there's just a change that needs to happen. And maybe for some people reading this book is going to be that event, because just as you go about it, it's like, oh, I do that, or oh, I'd really like to change that.
Mhm.
And I think just keeping this question in mind as I continue reading, it'll form a lot more as far as like what in my personal life
Mhm.
would change, if I no longer censored myself.
Yeah. Oh, Charity,
And
you
it's
have
like,
such great insights. No, go ahead. Keep going.
no, 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 that was a thought.
Okay, I love it. I want to follow that up with the very next sentence in on page one. I mean, literally, we could spend an entire call talking about page one alone, like
I know.
how much there is in here. Um, but let me just read this for you guys as a refresher. Is I almost actually I'm just gonna read the whole paragraph because it's good. I almost crossed that out, that bit about the monkey's head. In Burnmouth, I developed a rather unfortunate habit of redaction, seeing as how cousin Mathilde was no respecter of personal belongings, as proven by the Great Burning of 1882. Right, so yeah, we get that foreshadow, or I guess that like what a post shadow of what happened
Yeah.
before. Right. The tendency to assume I've no privacy has persisted despite my best efforts, but I am determined to break it. So again, we have this illusion that she, in some great incident, lost all her privacy. So what does that mean? Right. And then what does that mean for us? This journal does not deserve to have a foul black mark running through every incriminating thought. I will no longer censor myself. Exclamation point. And I love that she ended that sentence with an exclamation point. And I think it's actually the first exclamation point used in the book. So what a very like it's such a strong decision of like I will no longer do this. Um, but I want to go back to what you said about how we all have, whether it's a physical experience or just kind of an internal experience of our own version of the Great Burning. We get to this point, at least I hope and pray that we as women and we as people get to this point where we realize that censoring ourselves and playing small is actually only hurting us and it's only hurting the world. Our minimizing ourselves, our minimizing our thoughts and our experiences and the way that we see and experience the world, it doesn't serve anybody. If you guys are not familiar with the work of Africa Brooke on Instagram, I mean she's not just on Instagram. She does amazing public speaking events and stuff, but I really recommend giving her a follow. Her whole platform is based on ending self-censorship. And she is a creative that I've really, really admired and learned so much from. And the wisdom that she has about what that experience is like to stop that self-censorship. But yeah, I wonder for myself, because I feel like I've kind of been going through my own great burning in the last like two or so years of like, where am I? Again, the root of this question is how, where, and why am I censoring myself? Like what is that doing to me? What is that doing to my life? How is it keeping me in a box and keeping me playing small because I know who I am and what I want to create, and I know that version of me that's required to do that. And me censoring myself is continually pushing that version of me farther and farther away. And the only thing standing in the way of that is me because
Hmm.
I am censoring myself. So, how, any thoughts, Charity or Graham, on like how we can be like Emma and try and stop censoring ourselves?
You know, I don't know who the other people on the call, but please just interrupt me if anyone else has any thoughts. But I was just the biggest thing that I know, like just when I think of just me and censoring myself, it's a genuine fear of what someone else would think, right? But when you get past that fear, so like like there's a certain point where you're worried about how other people will see you, but there's an even deeper, more vulnerable part where it's actually you're worried how you're gonna think about you. And so like without it's there's certain things that like you've learned in the past. Say you told a friend a secret, quote unquote, and then all of a sudden all the other friends knew the secret and you were betrayed, right? And so or little things like that, like that's kind of how we learn the censorship, or it's social standards, or it's what's okay to talk about, what's not okay to talk about. But then when you think about it, it's like no one really tells you how it is that you should perceive yourself. They just tell you what you should be and all that. But the internal battle of like, okay, I would love to not censor myself, but also do I really want this part of myself to be out there? Do I really want to be that vulnerable? Right? And so I guess as I think about that, it's more of I think Emma's struggles are a lot less of she's really not worried what other people think about her. She really doesn't care at all. And I love that. And I think that's a point we should all get to. But what we are seeing with her struggle is actually her little insecurities, her genuine fear of being uneducated. Like she is terrified to be like her Aunt Matilda, or to grow up and become that. And that's what she's surrounded by. Um, yeah, 541. Sorry, hold on a second.
Oh yeah, go ahead and mute. um, I'm gonna get all Charity's secret phone number information. No, I think that's a super powerful point. And for everyone else who's gonna watch the replay, I would really invite you to reflect on that in your own life. Is at this moment, and maybe it's a little of both, or maybe you lean one way or the other, but at this moment, where would you say your fear is coming from most? Is it from being afraid of the perception of others, therefore you censor? Or is it that you really have that deep fear of like, am I okay with myself? Like, can I perceive me, and can I hold space for me? I think that is really, at the end of the day, like such a massive step in our individual journeys, is being able to love yourself come, hell and high water. Like, who are you and how do you hold you? And, can you fail and can you mess up and can you make mistakes and still hold yourself with love and grace, right? Still hold yourself to a high standard and to be better and to do better, of course. Like, I very much believe that it's so important for us to continually strive to be the best that we can be. I think that's part of the reason why we're here on earth, is to just live up to our potential. And I'll say that till the day I die. But can we, in our flaws and shortcomings, still hold ourselves with love and grace and with an open mind to say, oh, like, yep, that's not the version of me that I like want to be, or that was a mess up or whatever, and then continue to grow. Um, Also, for those of you watching the replay, please, please, I beg of you, share your thoughts and insights in the comments. I'm going to upload this to YouTube so you can watch the replay on YouTube. Share your thoughts in the comments, send them to me on Instagram, email, whatever. Like, I would love to continue these conversations, especially just to get more insights, because I feel like so just delighted and inspired by just charities already. So it's going to be so fun. Um, let's pop on to the next question. Also, you guys, there are a million different questions we could ask about in this initial reading segment. These are just some things that stood out to me. So if there's ever questions that you guys would want to talk about on the call, just send them to me and I'll add them into the question bank. But this next one was a reference to page 6. And it was another thing. I mean, obviously, most of this is things that Emma has said because they're her journals. But something that Emma said on page 6 was talking about how her dad never wants her to lose her bit of magic, and how she, as an adult, now looks in this mirror and recognizes herself less now than she did when she was a child. I suppose that happens when you've grown up and still don't understand your place in the world. As a 25-year-old woman, I feel like the battle of my 20s has been trying to understand where I belong in the world. And I don't know if this ever goes away. I will maybe tell you when I'm 90 and I've lived a whole life and I can have the answer to that. But the question that it made me think of is, how do we come to understand our place in the world? And will it ever truly feel like we've grown up?
part of me just hopes that I never feel like I've grown up because there is like an innate fear of like I want to always continue growing and I don't want to be in that that kind of stuck little plateau that I see a lot of quote unquote grown-ups at. Um, which part of me kind of wonders if that might be a little bit of what Emma's fear is too, right? Because she, I think she's introduced maybe a little bit of Cousin Archibald, um, and then Cousin Matilda, and it's just like you see adults that are grown up, right? But then you see them and you see how, say, childlike or how stuck or they're different things that they do, and you just kind of wonder like, ooh, I don't really want to become that. So it's probably a good thing that I continue always growing up and changing. So is if growing up is staying the same and just I'm there, I've reached it and I'm done, then I'm never gonna grow up. So
I love that. Graham, because you're the only other person on this call live, I would love to have your thoughts on this because you are farther along in your life and you have lived a lot more life. So if you want to text me, you should text me and tell me your thoughts. Or if you figured out the Zoom chat, you can send it there too. But I am so curious about what this experience will be like as, Charity, like both of us were 25 and kind of in our mid 20s, and um just this idea of what does it mean to grow up. And I don't know about you, but I remember as a kid I was so excited to grow up. I just wanted to be grown up. I just wanted to have the freedom and to do it. And like everybody's like, oh, you grow up and you're like, man, I wish I was just a kid again. And in some senses, yeah, like I did have really great childhood memories, and I had so many people in my childhood that really tried to make it magical and special and just as a childhood I think should be. And there's things about my childhood that I'm like, I'm really glad I'm an adult. Like I shared on my stories, on my Instagram stories the other night, in reference to something that Emma says later on in the series, is one of my favorite things about adulthood is reading outside in the summertime until the sun goes down and then continuing to read with a flashlight because I can. Because as a kid, my mom would always say, you're going to ruin your eyes. And you know what? I probably will. And I will happily do it because I delight in that experience so much. Like to me, the just the pure joy of sitting outside in the summer air, watching the sunset, reading a book that I love is worth the loss of eyesight in my eyes. Like maybe it isn't to other people, but to me it is. And so for me, getting to kind of take the things that I loved about childhood, aka reading until it was far too dark for me to read to properly read, and taking that into adulthood and getting to love that I have the freedom and agency to do that without my mom telling me to put my book and flashlight away, is great. And at the same time, like Charity said, and how we're kind of noticing with Emma, I am so afraid of plateauing. I don't want to be that adult that is just becomes satisfied with stagnation, or and not even stagnation, because I think some people like they don't do it on purpose and they're probably not, trying to never grow. They just get in their routine, they get in their habit, they get in their life, and it just kind of becomes the pattern. Like that's just their day to day. And I would hope that I could always be a person that is striving to grow and to learn, because I do think that there's a difference of growing up and staying stagnant, and growing up as in like reaching towards more knowledge and more experience and just more depth in the human experience. So um Graham, if you have any thoughts, love to hear them. um okay, page 8 was another interesting kind of symbolism that I picked up on. Charity, I don't know if you noticed this one, and then we also see it throughout the rest of the series. But how do traditions or rituals shape and define us? How do they help us find and hold on to a place in this world? And then in reference to this question was her lighting the candle on Good Friday in her window for her father. We don't really know much else about it at that point, other than apparently this is a habit that she has to light a candle on, I think it's March 23rd, if I remember right. Um, what page? No, wait. Page 8. think I'm combining two questions, but that's okay. Um, no, I think I actually marked that question wrong. This question will actually go with page 36, which is the candle ritual. Yeah, March 23rd. Today is Good Friday. I lit a candle for Father as it's the 23rd, and then another for Good Friday because it felt like the thing to do. I sat by the window and watched the two reflections in the glass. So, how do traditions or rituals shape and define us? How do they help us find and hold on to a place in this world? And then, what is the symbolism of the two reflections of the candles in the glass?
I don't know.
Do you have any traditions or rituals that have shaped you in your life then?
I'm just drawing a blank right now. As much as I hate to say it, I do have them. I just can't think of one right now.
That's okay. Go back and comment on the YouTube when this is uploaded because I would love
I
to.
will. I'll be like, okay, I came to me, guys.
Oh, no, I love it. One for me is our my family's Christmas traditions. I've loved Christmas ever since I was a kid. My mom just went above and beyond to make Christmas magic for us. But one of my favorite traditions is Christmas Eve. We make fondue, like charcuterie basically, but we make like fondue plates, homemade fondue, and have veggies and bread and dip it in the cheese sauce. And we watch a Christmas movie, picnic style, on the floor. It's so simple. Like there's really like it's paper plates. Like we're not doing anything crazy and wild, but it's has been one of my favorite family traditions just because we're all together and it just feels so fun to have a picnic on the floor. Like as a kid, that was the coolest thing ever. Um, and then another tradition that my mom had for Christmas is on Christmas morning, we would come downstairs and there would always be one present from Santa that was wrapped in a very specific wrapping paper. And only the present from Santa was wrapped in that paper. And she literally somehow managed to get her hands on enough of this paper to last us all through high school, even though obviously by then, we all know Santa is mom and dad. But like she would make it so special and then she would also sprinkle like pixie dust on it so it looked like I don't know, fairies and Santa and elves had all been there. And I love that she was so attentive to the little details, and that's something that I have absolutely taken away from the traditions of my childhood is my mom, even if it meant her getting zero sleep, she would make it happen so that we could experience the wonder and whimsy of the magic. And so I really, really have tried in my life to add that wonder and whimsy to everything that I do, whether it's spending 20 extra hours packing orders so that people can have a more magical, whimsical experience or that they can feel like it was specially wrapped for them, or I don't know, like just planning extra details that like take a lot more time, but to me it's so worth it because those things have really impacted me. And I hope that they help impact others in a way, and they also help me find a place in this world that like the world feels like it's falling apart. Like we look at the news, everything seems so depressing and there's so much controversy and so much hate and the pointing fingers and it's everyone else's fault and right, and it's just like the clamor, and so it can often feel like what's the point of all of it? What's the point of life? What's the point of traditions and rituals and things that mean anything when the whole world's just going to hell in a handbasket? But I think that I mean, it really does answer itself of like having those rituals and traditions actually gives us footing when the rest of the world feels like it's falling apart. It helps us find peace and it helps us find connection. Um, okay, last thing I'll say on this, just because I don't want to talk a ton, is to me, the candles in the window could be nothing more than two candles for Good Friday and for her dad. It could just be that. But to me, when I read that she lit two and she was looking at the two reflections in the glass, all I could think of was her dad was there with her. And to me, the symbol of like normally she just lights one flame or one candle for her dad because it's not always Good Friday. Um, But when I read that specific entry on March 23rd of the two candles, I was like, oh my gosh, like she wants her dad to be with her more than ever because this is the first 23rd that she's spent at Lapis Lazuli when she's home, and that probably has her missing her family even more. And so to me, it was just a tiny little nod of like, hey Emma, like I'm here with you. Like her dad was there in spirit in the reflection of the glass. So maybe it's nothing more than candles. Maybe it was meant to be like that. I don't know. We'll probably never know. But okay, page 20. This is just a silly question because I myself was trying to find an answer to it. But Emma's talking about, I can't remember if she is reading, if she stays up reading or if she stays up writing in her journal. Um, oh yeah, she's reading Paradise Lost. And she says, I was up late reading book one from Paradise Lost. Once the hour turned from late to ghastly, I snuffed out the light and sat in the window looking for the Roman. So I just asked in a sticky note, at which hour does late turn to ghastly? Just for fun. What is that hour for you?
So as I was reading this, now at this point in the book, I wasn't like actually reading to, a ghastly hour, but just when I think of that, I'm like, okay, it's late when I should be asleep, but like I'm within a couple hours of my bedtime. Ghastly is when the cuckoo clock is saying one, or the cuckoo clock is going two, and the cuckoo clock is going three. Like to me, ghastly is like it's morning now,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, which actually, yeah, I think it was 4 a.m. when I was finishing like one of the like book six, I think, because there's lots of exciting things that happen in book six.
Mhm.
But and I won't say anything. But it just was just really funny because like my husband gets up for work at, he goes to the gym at like 3:30 or has to leave the house at 4:30, and so like I was literally awake when he wakes up to go to the gym. And that's when it's like, oh no, this is ghastly. Like this is embarrassing is my thought. So that's when I read that, I was like, oh, I know the ghastly hour. I've reached the ghastly hour.
Yeah, I love
So
that so much. It's so real, you guys. I hope that you love this series enough after the first two books that you do what Charity and I did and just like binge the entire thing because I myself, I think I probably pulled two or three all-nighters by the time I made it to the end of this series because I literally could not put it down. Now, I think there's two ways to read this series. One is to savor it and to enjoy it because it really is a piece of art. And I think I say going back, I might have savored it more, but I honestly don't know that I'd have the self-control. I adored this book with my whole heart and soul, the series. Um, but yeah, I was like, I think for me, it starts to turn ghastly at about 2 a.m. Like when my body physically starts to feel unwell, I think that is the ghastly indicator for me. And I'm like, you know what? We're gonna keep reading because it's too good to stop. So
yep.
that was
And
just
at that point, you're like, I can't get a full 8 hours anyway.
exactly.
So
You're like,
like,
why? Just might as well stay up and read the whole thing. Yeah, no, I love that. Anyways, that was just to satisfy my own question because I thought it was funny. Um, all right, page 22. And I tried really, really hard to pull these questions from across the entire reading excerpt, so hopefully these resonate with you guys as you're watching the replay. Um, March 15th is the entry on page 22. And in this entry, she's talking about going to the garret. She's finally like buckling down and she's gonna clean it, right? She's cleaned it and scrubbed it. Excuse me. Actually, I think this is the day or so after she's cleaned it. I mean, she's rubbed her hands raw from the soap and the cleaner and she's gotten it all cleaned up and then she realizes the garret has mice. Now, I don't know about you, but I loathe mice. They are so like they're so cute when they're in a field and they have their cute little ears and their big little eyes, that's an oxymoron. You know what I mean? Like they're darling. House mice, I hate them. I hate them so much. We had a mouse problem in one of our old apartments because the guy we shared the wall with was literally like dying in his apartment. It was like a horrible situation and like bad all the way around. But like he wasn't taking out his trash and so he got mice and then we got mice because he got mice and it was disgusting. So we were literally catching like 2 to 3 mice a day. And when I read this page in Emma, I was like, oh my gosh, like I just feel for her so much because I went through this struggle last summer of how do I rid my house of mice. But as I'm kind of laughing reading this entry and sympathizing with her, it really hit me what she says to her sweet little servant, what do you call it? Her like her server girl, Agnes. Because Agnes asks her, "Do you need me to do that for you, Miss Leon? Like, do you need me to help scrub and clean?" And Emma goes, "No, no," I told her, "this is my battle, and you have a whole house to clean." Now, obviously, this is her battle in reference to cleaning out the garret and getting rid of the mice. And she's thinking Agnes has this entire house because they had to cut some of the other staff because of funds and things. And so it's just poor little Agnes who's 15 or 16 at this point, and she's responsible for keeping the entirety of Lapis Lazuli house clean. Right, so Emma's just saying, no, it's fine. But as I read this and thinking of the woman that Emma is and modern day life and like how do I apply this to my own life, I really was hit with the question of do we take our modern or in modern day, do we take responsibility for our own battles? Like even if it's a battle as small and everyday as mice, do we take responsibility for our battles or do we find ways to pawn them off on other people? Food for thought.
I like to think that I take responsibility for my own battles, but I definitely I feel like especially in some situations like if I'm comparing, we're talking about Emma and Leon or Lion, however we say it, but it would be really easy in her situation to not take responsibility for these battles, like she hasn't lived at the house. It is not her fault that there are mice in the house, and it would be so easy for her to hand this off to other people. I mean, she's the 16-year-old it was what scullery
Yeah,
maid turned
scullery
cook
maid.
turned in charge of everything else in the
Right.
house, and so it's like this wasn't even her job, but then this was all thrown onto her. And I just think it's really mature even of Emma to like it really isn't her battle, but she's choosing it. Like she's like, okay, this is I'm gonna take responsibility as the owner of this house, and like I'm gonna fix this, right? And so because it was I mean, what there was the page right before page four, or sorry, March 14th, it's
Mhm.
like 6 lines, and it's really just her saying, it's the sound that haunted me at school. It's mice. The garret has mice. And she's freaking out. And and just here we have once again a little bit of like that, the pre-shadow or whatever it is we want to call that, of like, she went to school and there were mice,
Mhm.
and it haunted her throughout school. And so, like, I think part of that is like she's recognizing that she could do something about it, and so she's going to do something about it too. So,
Yeah, no,
like,
that is such a good point, and I totally had forgotten that that was the previous entry to March 15th, because really it is. It's 6 lines. I found myself wakened in the early hours to a sound that haunted me at school, the scurry, the scrape, the scratch, followed by an all too earthly squeak, the garret has mice, and then two entries, or like two spaces down, I weep. That entry made me laugh so hard because I'm like, yeah, Emma, I wept when our apartment had mice. Like it is the worst sound in the world when you hear the little in the walls. Like it's awful. Um, but I love that you said that because there have been, and again, we see this from the very cover of the unselected journals and the incidents that plague Emma M. She has had incident upon incident in her short life. I mean, I think if I remember right, she's 2020. She turns 21 in January. Yeah, so she's 20 at this point. She has had so many incidents in her life. And to top it all off, she's now got mice. And it would be so easy for her to say, no, Agnes, like, yeah, you do it. Like, you are now in charge of the housekeep. Like, you are the housekeeper. Just pawn it off to her and for her to go take care of her other needs and necessities. But even though, and I don't feel like this is too much of a spoiler, it's just kind of a fact, but in English society, as a single woman, you had to be of age to be considered the legal matron of your house. So even though the house by law is Emma's, and this is Charity knows this already because she's read the book, but for those of you watching the replay, just for context, the house by law has been willed to Emma, but Emma is not technically the legal matron until she turns of age, which is on her 21st birthday. And so she's got 9 months at the house until it's legally hers to do what she will with it. So even though, like Charity said, she hasn't lived here for the last 3 years, she's been away at school. She's been with her cousin Mathilde, who again alludes to like not great things happening there. Now she's back, and even though she's not technically the head of the house yet by law, and even though it's not really her responsibility because by all delegation, it technically should be Agnes as the housekeeper who takes care of this. She is still taking this on as her battle, her responsibility, and really stepping up to the plate and kind of showing us like who she is, even something as with something as simple as mice. So that really was kind of the catalyst for this question of like, even if it's something so small, even if it's something that could easily be passed off to someone else or pawned off to someone else or say, no, it's not my responsibility. Like, this is your job description, take it. How are we in our own lives, in our own jobs, in our own relationships, stepping up to the plate and saying, you know what? No, I'm going to take this battle. I'm going to take this responsibility because I think the flip side of it, which we'll learn more about Emma's specific situation, but like in our own lives, it's probably I know it is for me, but so much more fulfilling when we do take full radical responsibility for our lives, because then we create the result. And when we create the result, um that means that we oh yeah, sorry, I just saw Charity left. Yeah, thank you, Charity. Um when we take responsibility for our own lives, then we really get to have all the joy and fulfillment of the result of the life that we've taken responsibility for. I've talked to so many of my successful friends, and we've had this conversation a lot about what it means to actually take responsibility for your life and the results that you create accordingly, and how they've told me there's no way I could be satisfied with my life if I hadn't taken responsibility for all the terrible things and all the failures and shortcomings and things that I didn't know. Because if I would have just like tried to make excuses for those things and I would have somehow made it to the success that I was at now, I would have just felt imposter syndrome and probably like lost it all because I didn't feel like I actually had earned it or deserved it or that I was like worthy of it, that I was just an imposter. Excuse me. So I think again, it's something so small as mice, but for Emma, but for us, it really is it's so huge. It's about whether we are taking responsibility for our lives and therefore our successes and being able to feel confident and proud in the success that in the life that we've created versus constantly trying to find an excuse, constantly trying to pawn it off to somebody else to make excuses and reasons why we couldn't or we failed or whatever, instead of just stepping up to the plate. Okay, last question that I had for today's call is we kind of already actually talked about this one because I got the questions mixed up. But on page 36, kind of going back to the symbolism of Emma lighting the candle, the last thing I wanted to touch on for today is what rituals do we participate in within our own lives to help us carry on our lost loved ones or the things that we've like left behind or that have been lost from us. Um, I love that Emma is one of habits and rituals. I myself really try to be a person of ritual and habit because I do think that having those intentional rituals really just brings so much more meaning to life and helps us stay engaged in our own lives and carry on the love and the traditions of our families and the people that have changed us. That is something that I feel like no matter where I go or who I meet, I am just kind of subconsciously collecting actions and habits and mementos and tokens of these people so that when I come back into my own life, I can carry them with me and keep them with me. Um, I kind of said that earlier with my mom. Is like that's something that her impact on me, even though she's very much still alive. Thank goodness. I feel very blessed that both my parents are alive. Um, that's something that I carry her with me in those day to day. It always makes me get choked up when I talk about this. But another thing that is someone I have lost, that a ritual that's very important to me is floral design. The woman who mentored me, who I was kind of her little intern under, um, she taught me so much about floral design. I worked for her for like 5 or 6 years. I mean, the vast majority of my floral education was under Darlene, and she has such a special place in my heart. And she passed away about 2 years ago from cancer. Um, and I miss her a lot. I love her so much. But something that I have carried on in her legacy and like trying to keep her spirit alive is every time I do flowers, I specifically pick a flower that I like think is really pretty or that just like is the highest quality, and I intentionally place that flower in the arrangement in memory of her. And I always just take a little minute to just admire flowers in memory of her because she taught me that you always look for the best. You always deliver the best to people, even if it's for a funeral or even if it's for a baby bouquet that like the baby like doesn't care. It's the flowers are actually for the parents, right? And a bouquet that might just get thrown away as soon as it's used. You always pick the best because you give your best to everyone. And I just loved that like legacy and lesson from her. And so that is one of those rituals that I personally carry and practice so that I can just feel connected to her and feel like I can kind of keep her alive in my own life. So, with that being said, I would love to invite you guys to think of if there's any rituals or practices or memories that you carry and hold on to and visit from time to time so that you can keep your loved ones that maybe have passed on close by and close in your heart. And again, Emma's ritual for that is lighting the candle on the 23rd for her father. Um, that's about all we know about the ritual so far. As you read, you'll learn more about that specific practice and why. But for now, it's just a candle. And for you guys, it can be something as simple as a candle, and it doesn't have to be big and complex. So, whew, okay, that I think will conclude our first call of book club. I am so excited for you guys to get to watch the replay. Please, 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 if you would take the time to either send in answers to these questions on email or on Instagram, or if you feel comfortable sharing them publicly, drop them in the comments in the YouTube. I will go through and read every single one of them. I would love to read them. And then just for reference for next call, we will be meeting on, let me pull it up. Call number 2 will be July 30th at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So we will be meeting on July 30th. That is a Wednesday. So Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific. So 3 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Mountain, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. And then the reading for that one will be April 1st through April 18th. So a little bit shorter segment this time. And the things that I would invite you to kind of look for in preparation for the next chapter call of book club is the neighbors and eccentricities of St. Crispin's. Here we're going to explore humor and social critique, kind of looking at the themes of high society and kind of the expectations and requirements of a woman in her 20s in London society and in English society. The art of noticing quirks. Emma is queen of quirks. Introducing the roles of reoccurring characters, and then asking yourself kind of how Charity actually brought up this call, but where does Emma choose to share or hide? And going back to that theme of uncensoredness versus censorship and self-censorship. Can't talk. And then what do we choose to share or hide in our own lives? Are we selected or unselected? So, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I am so grateful for everyone who was able to come live and who is going to be able to watch the replay. Um, Last thing, if you have questions that you think of in the reading, please feel free to message me so that I can include them in our discussions. as we grow, I might not be able to include all of them that are submitted, but I will do my very, very best to include as many as we can. And we'll just on calls just go as long as people want to discuss and as long as people can be here. So, anyways, thank you so much for everybody coming, and I will see you on the 30th for our chapter 2 of book club.